and welcome to the final chapter of Spoils of War. I hope that you enjoy this story. Up next, I will have a slasher thriller story for you, a change of menu for a bit. The first chapter of that one will be released tomorrow, so remember to tune in. And if you have not done so, you can help support me by subscribing. Thank you so much for your support.
Think about me one more time before you go. Someday you'll know. Someday you'll know. You already know what I'm going to say. I've been feeling this way for far too long. And now you're gone. Took me away from all of my fears. Kept me away from all of my tears. Now you're gone. And now I'm lost.
Present. Pa Kou watched as Maina wiped her eyes, and she felt a sting of hurt as she watched the woman struggle with her words. They were sitting on her living room couch with the window curtains wide open, letting in the sunlight. It was an afternoon meant for a story like this, she thought. This time, when Maina finished, Pa Kou felt sadness seep into her heart. Losing her husband was hard enough on her, but when she thought about it, it must have been harder still for Maina, for she lost him twice. She reached over and covered Maina's hands with hers, surprising both herself and the other woman. You got on the bus alone? Pa Kou asked. Nodding, Maina replied, I did. I made it to the bus and showed them my paperwork and got on. I did as he had wished me to do. I got on that bus, and when I arrived in America, I waited for the day he would find me. Every day I would wait, and every day when he never came, my heart told me that he never made it out of that field alive. Pa Kou wiped her eyes. I know that scar. Once, I asked him about it, and he told me that it was an old wound from a place he'd rather forget. He never let me touch it. Maina's eyes filled up with tears, and her voice cracked when she next spoke. You don't even know how hard it is to sit here and tell you this. To listen to you speak of how every night you were close to him while I waited a world away. Do you know how long I waited for him? When he never showed up, I allowed another man to enter my life as a replacement of him. And he hurt me in more ways than anyone could ever hurt me. The only reason I survived was because I kept what I had with Pao alive. My love for him kept me alive during those hard times. What happened between you and your husband? Pa Kou asked. Maina looked away for a split second before she answered. I never once thought I would be in this situation, looking inside as a stranger looked at my own life. But when things turned worse, I knew I had to do something about it. When I looked in the mirror, all I saw was a woman who once was. I couldn't live my life that way. I had already given him the best years of my life. I woke up one day and I saw the bruises on my face, and I realized that if I didn't do something about it, I'd never have the chance to do anything later on. So I packed my bags and I simply left. I never turned around, and it's been almost 5 years since I've gone from that evil place. But there isn't a day that goes by that I don't think of what he's done to me and all the pain that I've suffered from his hands alone. Pa Kou watched as the other woman stood up, her body slowly rising from a position that made her look enchanted. She stood, her long fingers brushed back a few strands from her face. When she lifted her eyes to look at Pa Kou, she felt the instant pain the woman hid. I think today has drained more of me than I'd care to admit. Perhaps when I feel more strength to continue, I'll come back, she whispered. The bright moon shining into Chu's bedroom woke him, and he stirred lightly, careful not to wake his wife beside him. He pushed himself up on his elbow and looked at the full moon. Sitting up, he swung his legs over the bed and walked to the window where he pushed the curtains to reveal the full moon. He placed his hand on the window pane and looked outside, and that was when he heard the creak behind him. He turned and saw a shadow walk across his bedroom floor and out the door. Frowning, he glanced at his sleeping wife and hurried out to catch the shadow by the edge of the stairs. Chu could tell it was the figure of a man. His shoulders were leaned against the railing, and Chu almost knew him. "Who are you?" he asked. The man stepped into the light, and as it played across his face, Chu realized that it was the face of his father. With a sob caught in his throat, he fell to his knees and crawled to hold his father's leg, sobbing uncontrollably. He felt strong arms bring him to a standing position as he stared into his father's loving eyes. "My son," his father whispered. "Father? Is this a dream? Why did you wait this long to come visit me? Don't you love me anymore?" he sobbed. His father reached out a hand and wiped away the tears he'd shed. "I'm taking my time to visit those who really need to hear something from me personally. I just visited your mother. Now it's your turn." Crying, Drew grabbed his father's shoulders and smelled his father's scent. "I miss you so much. Do you know how hard life has been since you've gone? I have no one to turn to when I need a father figure. I look everywhere, and all I see are fathers for everyone else but me. I'm left here, alone. Don't feel so alone, my son. I'm here with you always. No matter how far you go, I'll always be here with you." And then he stopped and looked out the window at the moon. "Do you see the full moon tonight?" Drew turned and glanced at it and then back at his father. "Yes, that's me." Drew swallowed down his tears as his father smiled and touched his cheeks. "I thought it was you. Children are amazing gifts for parents. In my life, I was blessed to have you four to entertain me when I was down. Do you know that a life without children is an unfulfilled life? Children give us the most beautiful gifts. They give us the gift of keeping our youth." He let you go, and then he walked around him to look in his bedroom at his sleeping wife. He turned back around. "The other amazing gift is to have a woman who loves you like you're the only one, and to return that back to her. I've told you so many times that a man's position in life is to love a woman. Without that, I don't think a man could really call himself a man." Chu sobbed and wiped his eyes. "I've tried to do all you've asked of me, Father. I've tried to make you proud." His father walked to him and held his shoulders. "You have made me proud. Now the time has come to ask yourself what would make yourself proud. You've honored me in more ways than you can, but you've yet to make a life for yourself. You need to add children to your life, hear their laughter, and hold them when they fear the dark. You've succeeded as a husband. Now I need you to succeed as a father." Chu nodded. "Once you do, you'll realize that even the most horrific events you've faced are worth facing for the sake of your children." Chu opened his mouth to speak, but his father began backing away. When he reached out to touch him, he disappeared, and all he saw was darkness around him. He stood there, in the dark, listening to his own ragged breathing as he wondered if what he had just faced was real or still a dream. He took a deep, shaky breath and wobbled back to his bedroom where Blair lay undisturbed. He found her in deep sleep, and when he turned to the mirror, he caught his own image looking at him. For the first time in a long time, he realized it wasn't his own reflection looking back at him, but his father's. Chu entered his mother's house and found it cold and empty. He closed the door and yelled out for his mother. When he heard no reply, he walked up the stairs to her bedroom. He found it empty, and he walked back when he heard something outside. He walked out the back door and found his mother kneeling by the garden that she tended to. He cleared his throat loudly for her to hear, and when she looked up from her gardening, he smiled at her and walked forward with his hands in his pockets. "How are you doing?" Chu asked. She smiled and wiped her hands on a cloth. "I'm fine. Are you here alone?" She nodded and walked and kneeled down beside his mother. He looked at the vegetables growing in the garden, and the flashback of his own father on his knees raced through his mind. He shook it off and looked up at his mother's confused gaze. He reached over and took her hands, which surprised her. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Last night, Dad came to visit me." Her face paled, and her eyes filled up with tears. She pulled her hands away from him and stood up, brushing the dirt off of her knees. She walked a few feet away from him before she turned back around to face him. He did. Yes, he did. He mentioned he'd visited you too. Why didn't you say anything? Shrugging, she replied, I didn't think I needed to. What did he say to you? I'm more curious as to what he said to you, my son. Ju got up, his heart heavy with the conversation he had with his father last night. I didn't recognize him at first, but then when I realized who it was, I just burst into tears. His mother's lips trembled as she came forward and brushed his face. I know how hard it is. Ju started crying. I never thought I'd actually feel him again like I did last night. I held him like I always did when he was alive, and it wasn't even enough. I know. He told me that I needed children in my life, and without them I'd cease to live a fulfilled one. She nodded. It's true, Ju. You do need children. You and Blia have been married for a long time now, and adding children will only make your life more lively. I miss him. I do too, Ju. I do too. The night had just begun when Lee felt the presence in the bedroom with her. When she opened her eyes and they fixed on the darkness in the room, she saw him standing there in the corner. She sat up, her heart thumping loud in her chest. She got out of bed and walked over to where he stood. It was real, not a dream. She started crying as she reached out her hands, and when they touched him, her sobs increased. Don't cry, her father said. Lee grabbed his arms and allowed him to pull her close to his chest. She laid her head down on his shoulders and inhaled his fragrance. She pulled back and stared into his dark eyes as the moon shone on his face. She saw every trace of laugh line, every wrinkle, and every age spot on his face. She sobbed quietly as tears ran down her cheeks. I have missed you so much, Father. Why did you wait this long to visit me? She asked. He tucked a few loose strands behind her ear. I have been watching you since the day I left. You may not see me, but I am always here. I can't find my way in life without you. I can't find the strength to go on when all I see is you. You have the strength to go on, Lee. You just have to find it in yourself. You have so much of me and so much of your mother inside of you. I know that you can find tomorrow. She felt her lips tremble as he sighed deeply and then turned away from her. She watched as his shoulders heaved up and down with his breathing. He turned around and looked at her with dreary eyes, and Lee watched as his face slowly turned into an emotion she didn't understand. Dad? Why are you here? She asked. He reached for her hands and held them in his tightly. Lee, I have seen your pain. I know what you go through every day with your husband. She gasped and pulled her hands away quickly. She turned away and felt the tears sting her eyes. She held her breath for a few seconds before she found the will to breathe again. And when she was finally breathing normal, she turned around and faced her father. He stood there, his shoulders sagging with the truth of her marriage in his eyes. You know everything then, don't you? I don't have to explain anything to you. You've seen the pain I've suffered alone, haven't you? You don't need to live with this day after day. I watch over you all, and I find you to be the saddest of my children. I hate that you're forcing yourself to live in a marriage built on a lie, he said. She started crying as she wrapped her arms around herself. Please, Father. I stand in this room, a room where you sleep alone, a woman who carries the name of a wife. Where is your husband? Where is he when you need him? He is out there trying to make a fool of himself of his own marriage. You deserve more than what that fool gives you. How can I leave him? We have children together, and I don't want my children to be outcasts in the world. I don't want to walk upon this earth and have my children being scorned for my mistakes. He reached for her hand and pulled her close. Of course you don't. But would you rather walk upon this earth knowing you could have done better? When you wake up every day and look at yourself in the mirror, do you see yourself or do you see a lost stranger traveling in your shoes? Your children will bear a name for your mistakes, but if you choose to stay, your children will pay for your mistakes in the end. They will never know that being happy is what they deserve. By staying, you are teaching them that being free and happy isn't a choice. Lee looked up at her father's eyes, and for the first time she felt as if her eyes had been opened after being shut for so long. She walked to him and watched as his tall frame stood over her small figure. I have thought of everything you've taught me, Father, and no matter how much I think of my own marriage, it never measures up to what you taught me in life. I know that freedom and happiness is what I should be living for, and that I need to pass this on to my own children. But I'm so afraid that if I do this, I will make an even bigger mistake. A bigger mistake by letting your children know that being happy is what you all deserve? No, my daughter. If you teach your children that happiness is what they need in life, they will forever carry that lesson with them. Don't teach them about sadness. Teach them that there is a choice for everything. There is a way out for every situation. And understand that in our culture, it may leave you with a name you don't want to carry. But if you want to live a life that is full and happy, you must do what is best for you. Don't force yourself to be miserable while he's happy. I watch you every day, Lee. I see the hurt he creates for you, and I see the lies he gives you. I watch as you swallow up every single one of the things he says to you, and I watch as you eat up all his lies and become full on a marriage of hurt. You deserve more than what he gives you. You deserve a man who will wake up and tell you that he loves you. You deserve a man who will hold your hand when you walk together. You are my daughter, and I want you to know that life has so much to offer you, but if you are afraid of stepping out or even making a change, you would never know what you have missed out on. Lee smiled through her tears, and she walked to give her father a hug. When she pulled away, she realized she was alone in her room hugging herself. She took a step back and felt the tingles run down her arms. She sat on the bed, and tears filled her eyes as she thought back about what had just happened. When she looked up at herself in the bedroom mirror, she caught herself smiling, and for the first time she realized she was actually looking at herself and not a stranger. Pa Kou set aside the basin of water and stared at herself in the mirror. She ran her fingers through her graying hair and sighed deeply. In the mirror, she caught sight of her youth looking back at her, but the woman standing in front of the mirror was far from it. She traced the wrinkles with her finger and wondered to herself when it was that the young woman disappeared and was now replaced with this fragile old woman. She turned away from the mirror and walked to sit down on the bed and covered her face with her hands and wept. But the cluttering of noise downstairs forced her to sit up and wipe her tears. She brushed her hair back as she walked out of the bedroom and down the stairs where she found her daughter Lee at the front door. What's wrong? Pa Kou asked. Lee entered and replied, I came to talk to you. Where are your kids? With my in-laws. Can we talk, please? Pa Kou watched as her daughter's eyes darted back and forth, showing a sad emotion that she knew all too well. She took her daughter's hand and led her to the couch. As they sat down, she realized that Lee wasn't herself. She wasn't the strong woman she had always known, but a stranger who was struggling with a hidden story that Pa Kou dreaded to hear. What's wrong? Lee lowered her eyes, and when she looked up again, tears were falling down her cheeks. Her lower lip trembled, and her chin began to quiver. Pa Kou, concerned, moved closer to her and grabbed her hands. What's wrong? Did something happen to you? Something did happen, Mom, and it made me realize how blind and stupid I've been. Tell me, she whispered. Dad came to visit me last night, and he told me that he knew everything about my marriage. Pa Kou frowned. Your marriage? What would he know that I don't know? He knows the truth about my husband and the lies he's been feeding me. Pa Kou's hand slipped free from her daughter's as she leaned back into the couch, shocked and surprised at the ugly truth. She watched as her daughter continued crying. I don't understand. If you were having problems, why didn't you tell me anything? I wanted everything to be fine, Mom. I wanted so much to believe that things would get better. But for so long, I lived in misery and pain that I'm so good at this lie. I've been lying to you, to everyone. I'm even beginning to believe it myself. Pa Kou shook her head. I can't believe this. He is a great father, he is. But when it comes to being the man who is supposed to love me, he's failing. He seeks company elsewhere, and when I look in the mirror, I find it so hard to compete with the woman that he finds. At family gatherings, the woman in his family, they never look at me. They don't talk to me. They don't look at me. I always felt that I wasn't good enough for him. Now that he's out there finding someone to replace me, all I can do is sit back and watch. And your father? What did he say to you? Flea brushed at her eyes. He told me that a life in misery is no life at all. I shouldn't let my children see me like this. I'd be teaching them that life doesn't have choices. Pa Kou nodded and reached for her hands. It's true what he said. If you're unhappy, you have a right to do something about it. You don't have to sit and take it day after day. Life is too precious to waste it on a man who doesn't deserve you. All you have in life are choices, my girl. You don't have to live in this darkness and let it eat at you every day. You can have happiness. Flea looked up, and a strong smile broke through. Thank you, Mom, for hearing me. I guess I needed to really set myself free. I have the strength I need now to make sure that I will be okay. The afternoon sun rose high in the sky as Pa Kou watched Maynard park the car and got out wearing a white dress, making her envy the woman. She walked to the door and Pa Kou opened it, but the nearness of her brought so much pain to her heart. I didn't call ahead, Maynard said. I'm sorry if I am bothering you. No, Pa Kou said. Come on in. Both walked to sit on the couch, one on the other end, and Maynard held her hands together. Her hair was down today, making her look younger and more vibrant. I've thought a lot about this, Pa Kou. I understand that this isn't easy for a wife to hear, but I want to thank you for allowing me to share Pao's story with you. He loved you, only you, and I was merely a past that played a role in his life. Pa Kou let out a shaky breath. You say that so often. It's almost like you are saying it for yourself. Do you still love him? She smiled. Of course I do. If he didn't have you, I would have done something to make him mine. The truth surfaced, and she let out a sob. The tears fell and she wiped at her cheeks. I appreciate your honesty, Maynard. You were the dream my husband chased when he closed his eyes. No matter what I do in life, I will always be one step behind you. This is a new chapter in my marriage to my husband. It doesn't change the love I have for him, but it changes how I will mourn for him. She frowned. What do you mean? I miss him. Every day, Maynard. When I wake, it is to think of him, and when I sleep, it is to think of him again. But I never stopped to think about what his thoughts were. I was selfish, and I wanted things my way only. This is another story to tell me that I must be grateful for what I had, because in the end, it is me who carries his name as a wife. I will mourn him in a different light from now on. I won't hate the idea of you and him. Maynard smiled and reached over to take her hand. I hope that you never do, because we are a story that was written to teach lessons. If we were meant to be, we would have been together. Seeing you and your children, the life you built together, it tells me that I was only a part of his life and that you were forever. Pa Kou smiled and reached over to hug the woman, the small frame of her body feeling hers. Maynard, I will never know how much it hurts to lose someone like you did. But I suppose in a way you may understand me because of your loss. We were so lucky to have been able to know Pao separately in different times of his life. Pulling away, Maynard wiped her tears and smiled through a broken emotion. I will always love him. He saved me, but most of all, he brought me to you. You know, I don't have any family that are living. If I asked you to be my sister, would you? Yes, of course. Pao's grave stood silent and tall, just as the man he was, as Maynard dropped the white roses on the ground. She bent down and touched the smiling photo on the tombstone, and fresh tears brewed in her eyes. All these years I watched every single man who looked a little bit like you in the crowd, and I hoped that when I called out your name he would turn and smile at me. But each time when I did that, all I saw was a stranger who gave me a polite nod. I have looked for you everywhere. I think to myself, that day, if I had stayed behind with you in the field and not left when you forced me to, maybe we would have had a life together. The kind of life that you and I had envisioned. But I suppose the universe had another partner in mind for you, so that was why it ripped me from your arms. She sobbed and wiped at her eyes as the sky above her darkened. I think about you all the time, Pao. When it rains, I think of how I saw you standing at the edge of the river. When it is warm, I think of you and how you and I gave each other love during a time of death and war. And when it's cold, I think about how you must have been when you were swimming in the waters. Everything I do reminds me of you, and everything I don't do speaks of you. Mena. She turned at the sound of the voice emerging from the woods, and there was Pao, young and vibrant, like the young man she'd known. She stood up slowly as he came to her, and a smile came across his face. Is this a dream? She asked. Shaking his head, he said, No, this is me. It's been a long time. Sobbing, she replied, Yes, it's been a very long time. You have beautiful children. They are beautiful, aren't they? They take after their mother's beauty. His eyes lit up when he spoke of his wife. I have never forgotten you, Mena. Through all the years I've been holding on to you because I wished to see you one more time before I died to speak the words I had to say. But I never got the chance to because time and distance kept us apart. I shouldn't have left you that day, she whispered. I should have died with you. Shaking his head, he said, No, Mena, you did the right thing. You lived, and that's what you shall do again today and all the tomorrows. You shall live. After you left, I made it out of the sugarcane field where I hid in a cave for another 2 days before I got on the bus. But my wound was infected, and the bus stopped at the hospital to have me treated. I lost my connecting bus to America. I had to wait another 2 months before I could come. The universe was too vast in America for me to find you. But his eyes started to sparkle with tears. But I found someone else. Pa Kou, my wife, and she gave me the most incredible thing. What did she give you? A second chance, he whispered. I closed the story on you and I when I took her to be mine. I vowed never to speak of you and to bury you with the past as I did my own parents whose blood stained the earth of Laos. That's why I never spoke of you, because if I did, my wife would spend her life wondering if she would ever measure up to you. Mena sniffed and chuckled. You're such a humble and loving man. She taught me that. You taught me to fight. You both played a very important part in my life, and I thank the both of you for it. As I journey onward today, I will take all the goodness you both gave me and remember it always. And one day, when the time is right, when we meet again, who will you choose? She asked. He came toward her and smiled, his handsome face lighting up. I would choose the one who bears my name. I love you, Mena. I always will. Carry on our story with you and let it comfort you in times of need, but learn to forgive yourself as I have. The story I wrote for myself included you, but it ends with Pa Kou. And promise me, as you promised your mother, live well. Mena smiled and she nodded. Thank you, Pao, for everything. Journey well. Go find your parents and your family. They're waiting for you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Spoils of War. I certainly hope that you enjoyed this story. I will see you in the next episode.
Think about me one more time before you go. Someday you'll know. Someday you'll know. You already know what I'm going to say. I've been feeling this way for far too long.